Shabbat Shalom. I'm Cantor Vera Broekhuysen of Temple Emanu-El. This morning, our Parsha, our Torah reading, begins with a call. God calls out to Moshe. Vayikra el Moshe vaydaber Adonai elav me'ohel moed lemor. The word Vayikra, as you can see if you look at the text in the Sefer scroll, ends in an aleph, and it's a very small aleph. It's about half the size of a normal aleph. God is calling out to Moshe so specifically, so lovingly. Why this small aleph? Is God messing around? The Baal HaTurim, Yaakov ben Asher, a 14th century Spanish rabbi, says that Moshe himself was the one who wrote that aleph so small, as he scribed the whole Torah, as we say he did. The Baal HaTurim explains that Moshe was a really humble guy. We saw this when he tried to get out of being the leader and the prophet of the Israelites. He says to God, my speech is not so good. I don't know if I can do this. I'm not the right person for this job. Pick somebody else. And just as with Vayikra, God says, nope, you are the one I want. You are the one who I need. Moshe didn't think of himself as being special. He didn't want to emphasize God singling him out as a special kind of prophet. And so instead of the word Vayikra, Moshe wanted to write, according to the Baal HaTurim, that God Vaikar him, that God happened to meet Moshe, almost by accident. This happens when God encounters other prophets later on in Tanakh. And the word Vaikar has the same letters as Vayikra, but there's no silent aleph at the end. God insisted that Moshe use Vayikra. God said, you are special, I am calling to you, this is exactly the word I mean. And so the compromise is that Moshe wrote the aleph of Vayikra, but he wrote it really, really small, almost as if it's not there. Moshe seems to be trying to make himself a very small, almost a silent part of God's voice. Aleph is the very first letter of the alphabet, and it has the smallest numerical value of all the letters, the number 1. It was probably the first Hebrew letter you learned how to read, and everything you've learned since may feel bigger and more complicated, maybe even more important. But Aleph, as a letter, is not always humble. Rabbi David Curiel reports that according to the Hasidic master Naftali Tzvi Horowitz of Ropshitz, earlier in Torah, when God begins to give the 10 Commandments, back in Exodus chapter 20, the Israelites, when they hear them, are overwhelmed by the force and the being of God saying, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, I am God, your Lord. And they are so overwhelmed that Horowitz says the only thing they heard of that statement was the Aleph at the beginning of Anochi, which is a silent letter. According to Horowitz, that Aleph, even though it was silent, had enormous potency. It rang with the thousands of souls of the Bnei Israel who were there at Sinai. We say that every Jew that ever was, that is, and will be, all stood together at Sinai to receive God's word. And so that Aleph, Horowitz says, may also be understood as the word Elef, 1,000, that it rang 1,000-fold with all of those souls and their hearing and their understanding. And finally, he says that if you look at the letter, the shape of an aleph, you can see a nose and you can see eyes, and that first aleph was in fact God showing the Bnei Israel God's face, God's eyes and nose in the letter of the text, just as in that first silent and yet not silent sound. So I think it's very easy for us to feel just like Moshe in this parsha. When somebody, especially somebody whom we think is important, who we rely on, singles us out and says, you are special, and there is something really important that I need you to do. We might not always trust that call. We might say, who? Me? I can't do that. I'm not good at that. Pick somebody else. This must be an accident. We want to write ourselves as small as that half-sized aleph, blending into the background. But we matter. What we do matters. Moshe could write that aleph as small as he wanted, but at the end of the day, he was still the one who God asked to talk to the Israelites and to help bring them and God into better relationship. Even when we feel smallest and most humble, even when we doubt that we are really the ones who are being called, we have inside of ourselves all of those thousands upon thousands upon thousands of Jews at Sinai, before, now, and to come. We are all part of the face of God, that nose, those eyes of the Aleph that is our beginning. We have, all of us, the enormous privilege and the enormous responsibility of partnering with God to make this world a better place. The Ramban, Rabbi Moshe ben Nachman, was another Spanish rabbi who lived about 100 years after the Baal HaTurim. Before. And he asks why it was necessary for God to even call to Moshe in the first place. Why that word? Most of the time, when God speaks to Moshe, God speaks. We hear, Vayomer Adonai el Moshe lemor. Or sometimes God commands, Vaitzav Adonai el Moshe or el Aharon. So why here? Why this call? Why Vayikra? And Nachmanides says that God had to call to Moshe because Moshe was afraid to come into the newly built tent of meeting, that Ohel Moed, which the Israelites had just finished constructing in the desert. God had given Aharon, Moshe's brother, the high priest, all of these really particular instructions about when he was to come in, what he was to wear, how he was to approach God. But there were no such specifics for Moshe. So even though God had said, I will speak to you from between the cheruvim that are on top of the ark, and that will be our place of discussion, Moshe was nervous, said Nachmanides. And without that call, without God reaching out and saying, come, I'm calling you, I want to speak to you, come in and let's talk. Without that, Moshe might never have come inside to continue his work as a prophet, which was so critical to the Bnei Israel and to them eventually coming in peace and freedom to the land of Israel. So a call can make all the difference. It can let someone know that they are special, that they are important, and that there is something critical for them to do. And you can make that call. You can likro el somebody else. You can call to somebody else. This is a time when physically we are all distant in a way that we might never have imagined. It's no longer possible to just accidentally bump into each other by coincidence. We have to call instead. So reach out this Shabbat, this week, in the weeks to come. Reach out to other people. Tell them you care about them. Ask what they need. Offer what you're able to offer. Share what you need. And don't doubt yourself when you hear a call from somebody else. This is the time to answer. We are all made in God's image. We all have the ability within us to do critical things for one another. And you can make a difference. Shabbat Shalom.